Today, I want to talk about the idea of accepting help from others. I believe that most of us grow up learning about the virtue of giving help to those who need it. And while a lot of people don't ever become generous, I do believe most of us understand that concept. Now, on the other hand, there's a concept that's a little harder for people, and that's accepting help from others. Why is that? So when we're talking about developing as a person, there's hundreds and hundreds of theories, from childhood development to cognitive to emotional to social. But for the purposes of the day, I'm going to offer up a simple model. Now, this model represents the three phases that we go through in life. And I think on first look, a lot of people will say, well, I recognize the first two phases, reliance and independence, but what is that third phase? And I would say that's because I believe a lot of us don't make it to that third phase. And as we work through our lives, a lot of people tend to stop at independence. So let's work through these phases. You start off with reliance, and reliance starts from the day you're born, for most people to those late teenage years, but it can be different from some. And so when we're talking about discovery of the world, we're not talking about literally looking at maps and flags and globes, which happens in school, but we're talking about discovering the world view, because you come into this world and you don't know anything. And so figuring out how the world works comes from everything that's around you. So if you are in a family where you're taking international trips, you might see different cultures and things up close. But if you're in a family where you just go to school and back home and you never leave that 5-block radius of the neighborhood, then you can know about these different countries and all these different places. But your worldview of how things work is going to be limited to what you see day in and day out. And so while this is happening, you're building your capacity from a foundational level. And we mean skills, all these things that you learn to just function as a human. So we're talking about learning how to talk, how to walk, how to communicate, how to write, how to do math, how to run, how to swim, playing sports. So this happens from the day you're born all the way through those teenage years where you're just learning your literal functions as a human. And so between these two, these are happening each day, but you're still dependent. And what I mean by that is that the food that you eat, the clothes you wear, the place that you live, somehow, some way is provided either directly from your parental guardians or indirectly from somebody else, either in the family or not. Whatever the case is, you're not able to provide it for yourself. And so you are reliant. Now we'll move to independence. And this is the one that people are familiar with. So now we're talking about self-discovery. And a lot of people, for this reason, tend to believe that college and higher education years are those years where you become independent. And again, it's going to be different for everybody because not everybody goes through those phases. But when you are becoming independent, it's more about self-discovery. So now it's not so much about how the world works. You understand how your worldview is, but you're now starting to learn about yourself. You're starting to really figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at, all these different things. And again, this is a phase that can go from young adulthood till you die, because it's going to be different for each person. And some people don't self-discover as quickly as others. But that's something that you have to take time to actually want to do and do. But eventually you start to figure out who you are in some sense, and you start to figure out what it is you think, and you develop your ideas. And we're not talking about just having ideas because you think it's right. You're not having ideas because other people said it, but we're talking about really discovering what it is that you think and what it is that you believe in. And again, this process can go on for a lifetime. But all while we're doing that, we're building our intrapersonal capital. And that capital is just the resources and skills. So we're talking about everything from the degrees in education you get, the certifications you get, learning to be a better communicator, learning to be a better leader, going to therapy and becoming more mentally healthy, We're talking about personal development. We're talking about getting into shape. We're talking about all these different things of what you bring to the table. So no matter what it is you're doing, you're building up your capital. So whenever you want to get into a new opportunity and you come to the table, what is it? What are the skills? What are the resources? What are the things that you have as a person that you bring to this? And again, that happens throughout life as you continue to build that up over those years. Now, while both of these are happening, you're starting to become self-sufficient, meaning that you can now provide for yourself. And again, it happens in a different timeline for everybody. Some in college start to wean off their parents. Some never go to college and stay with their parents. For some, they might start becoming self-sufficient as early as the age of 8 or 10 because they don't have people at home taking care of them. It's going to be different for each person. But when you start to reach that phase of independence, this is when you're taking care of things and you're providing for yourself. And so now when we get to interdependence, we're talking about social discovery. It's no longer just learning about what you want and what you can do and what you think, but you now learn about cultures and society as a whole. And it doesn't mean you have to completely change your life. You don't have to convert to Buddhism, but maybe you read an article or a book, or maybe you listened to a podcast or met a friend who's a Buddhist, and you said, hey, this particular practice they do, I like that. And it might add to my capacity as a whole. And so I want to adopt that into my lifestyle. Or maybe you took a trip to Europe and you said, hey, this one thing they do with the education system, I really like that. And you decide to start advocating for that here at home, or different things of that nature. So it's not that you have to completely change your life, but you're informing your practice with new information. You continue to see the way the world works in different ways, more specific ways, and you decide to now incorporate that into what you're doing. And so this, again, doesn't just come to your door. Diversity doesn't just walk up to you. You have to actively seek this out as you continue to lean on other people and their wisdom and their way of life to help you create a better life for what you believe you have. And then we're talking about interpersonal capital. We're talking about relationships. No longer your skills and resources, but the skills and resources around you, whether it be at work, whether it be family, whether it be friends. So you could get a new house, a bare house. You could stand in that house and say, hey, I know nothing about electricity, but I'm going to do all the wiring. I know nothing about plumbing, but I'm going to put all the pipes in my sink and my toilet. I know nothing about carpeting, but I'm going to tear up the floors and redo it myself. Or you could say, I'm going to elicit those services from other people who are experts in it. Or even better, you might have people in your family, your friends, whoever circle that have those skill sets, and they could do it for cheaper or maybe for free. And that is you saying, yes, I could provide it all by myself and do it all by myself because I'm independent, or I could lean to the other expertise or the help of other people to then get a bigger project done. And so these type of skills and capital are very big in corporate, in the business world and other places, where someone isn't going to say, I'll just go out and accomplish this myself. They enlisted the relationships of other people to get a bigger goal done. And people applaud that. But for some reason, as individuals, we seem to look at it in a negative way. Because when you're doing these two things, you're being polysufficient. And you're like, what's that fancy, new looking word? And it is new because there wasn't a word to really describe the opposite of self-sufficient. Because you can go to the dictionary, and while they might not be direct antonyms, you have similar related antonyms for self-sufficient. And you see words like weak. You see words like helpless. You see words like inadequate, incompetent. That is the natural opposite of what people look at being self-sufficient. So I have to offer up a new word, polysufficient, where you can be efficient or sufficient with the help and work of multiple people. And so the question is, well, why do people feel this way? Why do most people not get to interdependence? Why is it that we think the opposite of being self-sufficient is being weak? Why is it that society looks at it that way? And for me, I would go to the word pride. Now, pride is an interesting word. It's one of those words that can have very dual meaning. There's pride in the sense of the thing people want to look at their life and their work when they're done, or maybe their children. And then there's pride as one of the 7 deadly sins. And different cultures use pride in different ways, but it can mean 2 very different things. But I believe pride, at the end of the day, when we're asking why is it hard for people to ask for help, I think that's what we come back to. We can look at some of the classic tales of our time, the lion and the mouse, trying to take care of a problem, but being too prideful to ask the help for somebody, especially somebody that you believe couldn't even give you the help. You take it to the modern age, Avengers Infinity War. You got Tony Stark, Iron Man. The world's about to end, and he's hesitating to call Captain America Steve Rogers because he doesn't want to admit that he needs his help. And so when we talk about our society, we talk about the point we got to where we look at everything in black and white. We look at everything left and right, up and down. Everything 0 or 100. And so we got to understand, like I usually say, the truth is in the middle. There's complexity to it. It's not just, hey, I'm independent, and if somebody helps me out, well, now I'm reliant and dependent, and I can't provide for myself. If you have a friend with a snowplow and you ask them to plow your driveway, are you now no longer an adult? Are you now no longer a provider? Some people have to ask themselves if they think that way, because a lot of it, people can talk about gender roles, threats to masculinity because they're the providers. But I argue it's just an adult thing. A lot of people, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a grown man, I'm a grown woman, I'm grown. And that's what we have been conditioned to look at as being grown, being independent, not having somebody have to do things for us. Now, my argument is not that you have to be reliant on anybody. I don't think you should. I don't think you should be 35, 40, having, hoping that your mom or dad is paying for your bills or that they're washing your clothes or going to give you food. No. But at the same time, I don't think you have to be all the way the other way where I'm just not going to ask anybody for anything. I think the healthy balance is in the middle. And the reason we don't ever get to that 3rd level of interdependence, as I said, is just we tend to look at it in extremes where if I ask for help or if I receive help or if I can't do it myself, that's an indictment on my ability as an adult, or that's an indictment on my ability as a man or a woman or what have you. And I think that's the problematic socialization that we've had. Now, I would offer that if you're in those situations, ask yourself, what's the worst that I think that could happen if I ask for help? What do I think is the worst that could happen? And then really analyze if that makes sense or if it's possible. And then ask yourself why. The most powerful question, why do I feel that way? That's what my advice would be. Now, if we're talking about at the root of it, the psychology, people have talked about these things before, but it comes down to being vulnerable. People don't want to be vulnerable. because it takes vulnerability to say that I need help, that I'm not perfect, that I'm not completely in control, that I'm not able to do everything, because that's the false narrative that's been set up in society. Is that is when I'm at my peak, is that second level. When I'm independent, that's the peak. But the peak is not being independent. That's not the peak of adulthood and maturity. If you pictured somebody sitting there trying to fix something, they're trying to fix it, been at it for hours, fussing, yelling, upset, and somebody came along that fixed a similar thing and said, I can help you get that done. And they said, no, leave me alone. I want to do it by myself. Would you picture that as an adult, or would you picture that as a child? And I think that's the mentality we have to get out of. A child is someone that sits there and says, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. A real adult is somebody that says, yes, I'm going to use the expertise of somebody to help me complete it. Not do it for me, but help me complete this. Because I know that together our skills can accomplish something, rather than it's more important for me to seem as if I can do it by myself. The peak is interdependence. But we've been socialized to think that means weakness. That if I'm going to allow you to help me, I'm being vulnerable. Vulnerable to tell you I'm not perfect, but also vulnerable that you might now make me owe you something, or that there's a string attached and I don't want to owe anybody, so I'm just going to do it all by myself. And make no mistake, everybody's interdependent. That's the big lie. Everybody's interdependent. You'll say, well, oh no, if I'm Bill Gates and I got this much money, I don't have to rely on nobody. Bill Gates is interdependent. Guess what? If Bill Gates has billions of dollars and he woke up tomorrow and went to the store, pulled out $100, said, I want to buy this. And they said, sir, we don't accept that. We don't any longer accept cash or US currency. We only accept buttons. Or maybe they said, we no longer give our stuff away. Or maybe this month, the way he's making money, nobody uses his products anymore. Or an extreme example, if he woke up and there's nobody here on earth, what does that money mean now? So everybody's interdependent. Interdependent isn't about you as an individual. It's about you waking up and understanding the connections we have in the world. Because we're all dependent on somebody. The person making money is dependent on the consumer. The consumer is dependent on the person making the product. People making the product are dependent on the suppliers. Suppliers dependent on them. It's all connected. And so the peak is being interdependent. But we're never taught that. We're never taught that it's stronger to realize our connections and to seek help. We look at it as weakness. So that's it for me. Go down to the comment section. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it as well. Share it around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.